Welcome to Module 3, Creativity at the Core. This week we are focusing on implementing arts through communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. These are the four aspects of 21st century thinking skills. Artful discussions. We're going to be thinking about how reading, writing, speaking, and listening can be translated through the arts. We're going to explore the importance of arts integration, so that is integrating the arts through curriculum, examine the power of an artful discussion to support student engagement and deepen learning, make connection across standards, and practice planning an artful discussion. Now, let's take a minute to listen to this video and think about why the arts. So just like when we integrate other subjects together, math and science, reading and math, social studies and communication, art plus all of these major subject areas equals arts integration. There's importance for integrating the arts, primarily because we're able to increase student motivation and engagement. When we think about how children engage in learning, there's really multiple modalities, different ways that benefit children from being able to express ideas, engage with ideas, learn ideas, test out, think, create. And the arts allows a child a window in learning that would not normally be there if presented in traditional methods. As I mentioned in the opening, 21st century skills consist of the 4 C's: collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and communication. And so when we integrate with the arts, we are capitalizing on each one of these important 21st century skills that we believe as educators and society believes are going to be critical to future jobs and the future economy. The power of visual arts. The importance of images and visual media in contemporary culture is changing what it means to be literate in the 21st century. Today's society is highly visual. Visual imagery is no longer supplemental to other forms of information. Just think about, using an iPhone or an iPad and the digital technologies that have made it possible for almost anyone to create and share visual media. Yet, the pervasiveness of images and visual media does not necessarily mean that individuals are able to critically view, use, and produce visual content. Individuals may develop these essential skills in order to engage capably in a visually oriented society. Visual literacy empowers individuals to participate fully in a visual culture. So when we think about how we're going to use discussion and art, a good discussion is like art. It may be hard to define it, but you know when you see it. So what is an artful discussion and why does that matter? Think back to a good discussion that you have had before, either when you were a student or in your work as a teacher. Reflect and record. How does discussion enhance student learning? How does discussion improve student motivation and engagement? Why is it important for students to have a common language to discuss art? I want you to think about what you have learned in other classes about how the brain works. The brain is a pattern-seeking device. That means that when sensory information comes into the brain, it immediately moves into the temporal lobe where the integrative cortex is trying to make sense out of what is this information? What do I know about it already? If children don't have a common language to discuss art, that means there's a group of children with maybe that lack that knowledge, that common language, who aren't going to be able to participate in the discussion. Discussions, when there is a common language, can then enhance student learning because they're able to collaborate, they're able to problem solve together, they're able to communicate with a common language about the art they're discussing or the subject area. And then as discussion becomes student-centered and students are giving their perspective and sharing it freely, their motivation is increased. When we plan an artful discussion, we want to choose pieces that perhaps go with the area of study. So you might want to pull an artwork, as you just saw in the previous slide, and prompt with a question. How would you describe this artwork to someone who could not see it? An engagement would allow other children to think, how can we summarize, or who can summarize what we just described? Very simple questions that are intentional about the art piece. So we want students to engage in a common language and describe elements of art. Then we want to build on that knowledge and we want to reinforce that knowledge by recapping and summarizing. We might use an analysis in an artful discussion. Do you see a similar element being used in this piece? How do they help achieve harmony? And then we would have some sentence starters. Harmony is achieved by. So analysis helps us think about the principle of design involved in the art. Modeling is a way that teachers and children can model for one another how to engage in an artful discussion. Marking is a way that teachers can give feedback and students can give peer feedback on analyzing the principles of design accurately. Further, for analyzing an artful discussion, we can think about other questions for different types of elements. What kind of mood or feeling do you get from the painting? Did you know the thin washes of drips of paint filter and lens subjects as though through the veils of memory? So that is giving more information. So when we have a question that elicits, what do you think? What kind of mood or feeling? That's interpretation. When we have this engagement that's very, very technical about the perspective that the artist actually used, then we're annotating. Question, what is the value you find in the artwork? Engagement, what is another way to evaluate what you see? So we are leading students to understand how to judge the value of artwork and to evaluate and revoice. How would you describe the artwork to someone who couldn't see it? These are going to support, these types of questions, again, support an artful discussion. What's the value you find? What kind of mood or feeling? Do you see similar elements? In your resources, browse through the flipbook. What is the purpose of it? What components are included in the book? And how might you be able to use this resource to support the integration of the arts? When we're thinking about enhancing critical thinking, we go from some lower level thinking of describing, because we're identifying the elements of art in the artwork, we're describing it. Now we're going further because we're analyzing the principles of design, giving more connections to what we're finding in our analysis. Then we're leading towards interpretation, and then we move to judgment. So we have these discussion moves that are helping children to go through these processes of higher order thinking. And then the text-dependent questions help get to that piece. Text-dependent questions, more about this, questions that can only be answered by referring explicitly back to the text. The text in this sense is the painting. Text can also be the original words of a piece of writing, a musical composition score, or a source of information. This makes me think about how a colleague of mine at her school, one of the third grade teachers, they were studying struggles throughout time. Of course, this was upper elementary, and so this project was very abstract in terms of understanding struggles of other groups of people throughout time, starting with the Jewish Holocaust in Germany and leading up to African American slavery in the United States, and really examining different individual groups' struggles. During this time frame, there was a popular song by John Legend that the students actually used as their text, as a source of information to engage in describing, analyzing, evaluating, and judging. So there's printed text versus visual art. There's also printed text. Is this an example of printed text or visual text? Printed text. Is this printed text or visual text? Visual text. Printed or visual? Printed. Printed or visual? Printed or visual? A very famous photo. Printed or visual? Printed or visual? Printed. So you're getting the hang of what is printed or what is visual. Printed or visual? Visual non-print texts. Advertisement, cartoons, films, videos, sculptures, stage productions, art reproductions, posters, photographs, and paintings. We can think about English language arts and literacy standards that are engaging in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So we use reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Those components could take place in artful discussions depending on the age of the learner and depending on your goals as a teacher. But remember, in artful discussions, we have this element that's developing, and it's the stages of art criticism, because that is a component of the arts. So again, we have these discussion moves where we're moving from describing the elements of art to analyzing principles of design to interpreting what mood or feeling is this art presenting to you, and then a judgment. So describing, analyzing, interpreting, judgment. These discussion moves help get to text-dependent, or not just help get, the discussion moves rely on those text-dependent questions. So we want to engage students in collaborative discussion about art. We want to promote this critical thinking and creativity. That's what's happening when you have those discussion moves moving from describing all the way up to judging. Describing, analyzing, interpreting, and judge the artwork. So part of those discussion moves involve these specific behaviors, such as marking, where maybe the peer or the teacher marks the student's comment as accurate. Modeling, where the teacher might do a think aloud to help get the information moving. Revoicing or recapping, where we're reinforcing the ideas, whether the actual, like recapping, we're going to summarize those elements. Revoicing, we're going to make sure we say back what we heard that the individual has interpreted. Here is marking. That's an interesting interpretation of the artwork. All right, what discussion move am I in now? Who can summarize what we have just analyzed? Recapping. So summarizing is your goal for helping you understand, is your clue, sorry, for recapping and summarizing. Could the reason you find the artwork lacking come from a poor use of the elements of art? Please explain. What do you think this is? Turning back. Could you feel that? That we're turning back. We're trying to turn back the idea to the person so that they can really explain their thinking. Why do you think this is really what we're asking here. Could the reason you find this artwork lacking come from a poor use of the elements of art? Let's try another one. It seems you are saying, revoicing, right? When we revoice someone's statements, we are using good, active listening and communication skills by saying, here's what I think you're saying. Which move am I? Words I might use to describe the artwork are. Now, if you remember earlier, this is where you're describing the artwork in detail. I'm trying to give you a hint. Modeling. Modeling. Did you know that Van Gogh sold only one painting in his life? Starry Night is one of the most well-known images in modern culture. And this is annotating. So annotating is we're providing and embedding, we're really embedding that information.